Hey everybody, how you doing? Well, we've had a hot week. I'll tell you, I hope you've been able to stay cool. Um, okay, so we're at the really almost the end here. And some people have picked up their game, or most people have picked up their game. I appreciate it. And still seeing stuff though I shouldn't be seeing though, so I just want to maybe address that a little bit. But also spend much of the time. I have a pre-recorded lecture tape on the major assignment I'd like to show you. So. Just basically how to develop it. It's essentially just really a longer story we've been doing with similar topics. And what I want to do is essentially just give you the opportunity to actually think of your own idea here and approve it and see how you can do it with something that instead of me just directing you with what I like to see is basically like more like what you'd like to see in this story. Okay. So anyway, here's one of the actual stories that came in like a couple of years ago from somebody. Again, it was a student who was living in China and basically just did a story on a reaction to, or unfortunately, a plane crash that killed 132 people. Terrible. But this person, I felt like really did a good job, really trying to capture the emotion in the scene, but largely did it through his own writing. Okay. Didn't rely too heavily on the direct quote. Just basically, again, like using his own writing to basically capture the experience, and his writing's better than the way people talk typically. Okay. So, the airplane MU5735 crashed. Now, he was actually he was actually kind of trying to translate this into English, so maybe a little bit rough, but still, I think the message comes across. It crashed in China in March. It killed 137 people. It's still affecting people. It makes people frustrated about it. Okay. First transition. Some people said this is still shocking and terrifying for them since they haven't heard of a major plane incident in a while. This one passenger said he was planning to take another flight on the same day of the crash. Said he was planning to take another flight for work. Like I said, it's a little bit of a rough English here, but he did the job. He was shocked when he heard about the news of the accident. He said he had hardly heard of a major accident before. I know some of this sounds redundant. This time he had heard that the plane suddenly and rapidly fell from a crash, blah blah blah. Again, it's not so much on the crash, but actually the reaction to the crash and where he was and how he felt about it, okay? Then we have another transition right here. Some other people said it would affect their lives a lot because they have to take an airplane really often, and they are worried about the safety of air travel now. Okay, a man named I can't pronounce his name. I'm sorry. Said due to work reasons, he often tends to travel different cities to meet customers. China's a big country. Okay, in addition to China's high-speed train, the plane was the most common form of transportation. Said he was terrified about the plane fell from such a high sky and everyone on the flight. See, basically just talking about living the experience and using your own writing to do that. Okay. That's one of the samples that I actually have within the assignment itself, the assignment entry itself. Okay. Um, Going right here. That's Jawin right here. Okay. I also have Morgan. Her quotes, I like her story, but her quotes, I have to admit, probably if I did it now, I probably would actually have said to her, probably her quotes are a little bit long, try to shorten them a little bit, but she did a good job. I mean, I don't mean to be like so fascist about this whole idea of like trying to paraphrase and overquote, but when I see some, I've, you know, right now it's kind of early in the game. Not a lot of papers have come in, but I've basically, I mean, I'll tell you that, one of the papers I saw so far, which was generally a good paper. But what I saw was this. Okay, and I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get to that spot where I need to be. And where did that go? Um, oh, sorry. There it is. Okay. Um, it was again the paper. I mean, the person did a good job, generally speaking, but again, kind of falling into the trap of relying too heavily on quotes. And this feature story really kind of relies really like depends upon that more than anything else because you were really trying to be a narrator and trying to write your own story here and trying to write it in a more colorful way. Okay. And that same philosophy should apply to the major assignment, whether you write it with an anecdotally or not. That's your choice for the major assignment. Okay, you can write it with a straight lead too if you want. Okay, but like one of the things I saw was in quotes something along the lines of this. Um, I walked into the class and I saw. I'm sorry, I should have it like this is a direct quote. This isn't exactly how the quote went, but I saw people fanning themselves with a syllabus. Okay. All right. I mean, that's actually maybe considered a decent quote. But wouldn't you get more out of this by saying this? Like describe the actual mood of the class or the way the class looked. Okay, like this. That idea of fanning yourself with a syllabus should inspire more description. Okay, not just that by itself. You walked into the class and see, note now our prayer and saw people fanning themselves with, I guess it'd be syllabi, right? Then maybe add the description. He saw people with sweat running from their collar to their waist. That's just I think I walked out of some of these places like that. See, just kind of add to the scenery. Also, another thing I saw was he said that he I got out of I was in my car roasting and it was so hot. And then my first question, and it was answered in the next par actually it wasn't like that. It was actually like actually first he paraphrased it and he said it like this. He said he was hot from the it was actually no detail. It just said he was hot from the car ride or something like that. And then I was like my comment was there no AC in the car? And then the next paragraph had a quote. I had no AC in the car. Well, that's first of all, it doesn't need to be in a quote. And second of all, that's just not enough detail. Imagine not having AC in your car in this weather, man. And what I wrote was basically, oh my God, like that's I had that same situation because I was too cheap to buy a car. Well, I didn't have money, but back then when I was at Rutgers and everything, I remember I was doing a summer class and it was so hot, so incredibly hot that I just, oh my God, it was just torture. Um, it was just absolute torture. Um, and and I just remember being like, oh my God, this needs more description just saying there's no AC in the car and it got hot. Okay. Depth means adding to that. Describe what that was like. I mean, if I was writing about my experiences in the car, say with no air conditioning, say Tom Davis drove to Rutgers. See how hot it is in 96-degree heat. He had no air conditioning. Okay. Again, he was sweating from, I mean, you don't repeat with something, but maybe just say like his t-shirt was soaked with sweat. Um, I mean, I used to get like tired from it. He felt like he was ready to sleep. And then like then he had to get out of the car and go into a classroom that was even hotter. Then you get into the whole, you saw people fanning themselves. Isn't that better? Like more dramatic, the way it's written and stuff like that, Just relying on direct quotes. I described the whole scenery right there. I mean, it's one thing to just basically say like, okay, he has a car with no AC, but it's another thing to say like how that impacted him. You can add on to that and add description, add depth to the story and make it even more interesting. I mean, that you could like, I mean, you can't even keep a dog in a car with no AC, okay? You know, that's actually considered very dangerous to the animal. They could actually get really hurt by that, you know? So that's when you have like those kind of elements of like, feature-ish kind of like um material, you can really develop it and like turn it into something a little bit bigger, okay? With more depth, okay? And that is also something to keep in mind for this assignment too, because it's really up to you. You might want to venture into more of a feature-ish direction with this assignment. You may not want to. It's really up to you. I mean, if this one paper right here dealt with housing, it was pretty much a straightforward story. This paper right here about the reaction to crash was more of description and feature oriented, okay? What I'm gonna do right now, actually, for the rest of this class period, is I'm gonna actually show you a video that I made that basically talks about this feature assignment, okay? And basically like how to like maybe what's a good way to approach it, okay? All right, so let's talk a bit about the major assignment. Interesting thing about this is that, and let me go to that a bit. Let me actually stop sharing. Is that, again, this kind of story is like, I'm not necessarily looking for a feature story. I'm not looking for really anything. Actually, this is really a story where you really got to like be like your own self-manager, something I talk about all the time in digital media, where you got to basically really kind of like think for yourself here and like come up with your own structure. Um, I may have said this in the past. I'm just want to change one thing. You can use an anecdotal lead if you want. That's fine. But I want to make sure that actually like people understand that this is not supposed to be like a research paper. Okay. This is still a news story. I've seen a couple of examples that people have sent through where you felt like you needed to have, again, like a really long kind of like beginning or preamble to it. Um, just so you know, this is actually the week where you actually really started like developing rough drafts and like showing me that. I know I've been giving you guys assignments to do, and you want to have the weather assignment rewrite done, but this is actually just the last week, so we really got to like get going on this, okay? And I mean, you gave me the ideas, you gave me a good ideas. I think I've approved everybody's idea. A couple of you just wanted to actually change. That's fine too, as long as you get it done. I think right now it might be a little bit late to change at this point, because you got a week to do it. But again, I'm not looking necessarily for like a major research paper here. Okay. Not trying to make an example of anybody. I really appreciate the fact that this student actually sent me his rough draft early. But one thing I want you guys again to avoid is the research paperese. That I tend to think. I mean, this is a news story. Okay, it's a news story. It's just longer, 800 to 1,000 plus words. That's it. Okay, so basically, it's twice as long as what you're typically be doing. And again, don't forget that the weather assignment counts twice as much as the previous assignments did, and then this is going to count 4 times as much. So you really got to make sure that you get it right, and you really want to make sure that you get it to me so I can see it. But what you really got to do though is also remember that we're sticking with the same line here, and that is that we're still writing news stories here. Like this story right here had an incredibly long beginning. Okay, and again, this is just a rough draft that was sent to me a while ago, which I appreciate. Actually, the second draft was much better. So this year, the summer class directors. This is actually a story about how essentially the summer class the summer class schedule changes like all the time or something like that, and it kind of throws people off kilter and that sort of thing. But this actually is actually not like the data journalism assignment. This actually is essentially what I told them, a reaction story. Okay, this if I really wanted to drive you crazy and have you hate going to Rutgers and everything, I would have you do like a full complete story where you would have to interview like administrators and officials and into all their decision making and everything. But that would be like a really long story. It would require a lot of research that you don't have the time to do. Okay, I'm sorry, you don't. Okay.
So what I'm actually looking to do is actually just do a story that is very specific, and that is specific is essentially the students reacting to the changes in the schedule. Okay, that's a good story, and it can get a voice out there that is specific, and also maybe get to the administration themselves. Ideally, I would like to maybe get some administration reaction to respond to the students in the story, but this is much more simple and works much better within our time constraints, just to work as a reaction story of students reacting to this. Okay. This year's summer classes for Rutgers students will not be as flexible as they were in private year. Well, first of all, that's actually a little bit of an opinionated statement there. The change in how summer classes are being presented is because Rutgers has begun to open up the school, since it's kind of going into all this explanation about why they're doing it, which I don't really need. It's also coming, is that from the administration? I don't know. There's a lot of setup here. With the pandemic coming down, most students will be in person this year. The schedule, the reaction from, now we finally get to the story. This is where the story is right here. Now, this is not an anecdotal lead, okay, that I'm looking for. An anecdotal lead would be, again, focusing on somebody's specific crisis involving the summer class scheduling. But, you know, instead, there's just a lot of setup about why the university is doing this, but we're not getting to the story, which is right here, okay? Which is what I asked them to do. The reaction from students to the release of summer classes schedule has been met with dissatisfaction. A little bit of a passive voice statement. Most students say, oh, that's another cardinal sin. No first person. Just say many students believe it is better for summer class to be online than in person. It could be the first transition right there. Now we get into like another point, flexibility. There's just like tons of setup before we even get to like an individual student. Okay. And no, that's not how we're doing it. I mean, if you want to get to 800 words, you don't do it by padding. You don't do it by like just going into the whole explanation about how summer classes work. This, before we even get to a student, it's how many words? It's 176 words. So it's almost 200 words before we even get to like a student. Okay. And this is actually about students and the reaction. If you want to get it to 800 words, just interview more students, interview 7, 8, and you'll get their individual experiences, that's all. You have to get more substance as opposed to more style. Okay. More reporting. That's all. And I said this to you guys, I think earlier in the semester, and that is, again, like if you ever do go into this field, you ever get asked the question, are you a better reporter than a writer? Okay. You always want to say reporter, because the substance is what carries the day. That Guy Talese story I showed you before was a feature story, very stylistic, the whole thing. But he actually worked to get that information. There was substance in that story. It wasn't just style. He actually basically like not stalked, but basically like, he couldn't interview Frank Sinatra, first of all. He had to basically interview everybody around him, So that requires work. That means interviewing, getting information from people, as much information you can from people to paint pictures within the whole story, to paint scenes, to tell anecdotes, that sort of thing. And you just build that into a larger story, okay? So then, the rest of the story actually does deal with the students and their reactions, okay? Which is good, okay? But it did need all that setup, okay? All right. Let me get out of here. So anyway, let me go to some of your ideas that you guys had to show how this can be approached. Those of you who live, I guess, China right now, a bunch of you actually talked about this accident, I guess, that had happened, involving a plane. I guess it was in China. I guess that's horrible. I'm very sorry to hear that. And I'm on the wrong spot. And I just wanted to basically say that that's a fine. It's horrible tragedy, but I mean, it's a good story to do. But what I suggested was actually just basically, just sticking with the, maybe the reaction or the impact that this has had on people. Okay.
Here's how my friend published her book in less than 30 days. I never thought it could be this easy. I heard about Spine's book publishing.
So I guess you're wondering, like, why? Oh my God, what happened there? I had to change locations because the cord was over here and I was running out of battery. So, so it was it. Sorry about that. Boy, asynchronous running, right? All right. So, let me actually talk about that. Anyway, so there was this idea that I actually approved a bunch of people who lived in China that had this idea right about the plane crash. And I basically said that, okay, so again, like, you don't necessarily want to write about the plane crash happened. You want to get into maybe the nitty gritty of that, an investigative piece, that sort of thing. You know, everything about journalism. Why am I asking people to like shy away from that? I mean, it's not like I'm trying to teach people how to be like shy away from stories or something. I'm trying to teach people how like to do things that they're able to do, to understand, first of all, the importance of like following instructions. The second of all is the importance of time management. And third of all is basically not overshooting or undershooting. Okay. Basically knowing what you can do within the time frame allowed. Because one thing you're going to notice if you do stick with journalism classes is that there's going to be a lot more about actual, you know, again, self-management, coming up with your own ideas, you know. And when you come up with your own ideas, you got to be able to understand, well, you got to do what you can only do. Okay. This actually was from Jia Wen. My topic of this assignment is the air crash that happened on March 23rd, 2022 in China. It caused, God, it's awful, 132 people died. God. There are thousands of airplanes that fly every day. It's important transportation, blah, blah, blah. So what I said was, this can work, but you got to make this about today. What is the latest? Who is reacting? But really, it's about this: who is reacting? Okay. So what I suggested to everybody was basically just this: that you should just get reaction from people that basically like might feel personally affected by this. I mean, it's not been. Maybe I'm off kilter or something, but you know, I'm old enough to remember when like plane crashes like this, unfortunately, happened seemed like every other month. And you know, I like to think that you know air travel has actually improved a lot since then. And I mean, a lot of people were afraid to go up in the sky, but now, I mean, you haven't really heard about this kind of thing, and it does happen. It's like so shocking. And so, what I would like to see is like, and actually, I'm just going to use my little whiteboard here. Okay. Um, you know, basically, you would have a lead that would basically address obviously the China plane crash, but it's not necessarily about, you know, think about the sliver of the angle you got to go with here. It's not about the China plane crash itself, but you know, maybe like you focus on one specific group. Maybe it's like people in whatever town are still feeling upset about, not still, but are still shocked, even are still the plane crash that killed 132 people in China. I mean, you're going to submit this on May 2nd, so we'll just say March, okay? I mean, something as simple as that, you know. Just, I mean, I would have to think that if there was something that happened, let's say, even in California, which is 3,000 miles from me, there's a plane crash like that, I would think I could find 8 people in New Jersey, which is 3,000 miles away, who would still be upset about this because it happens so infrequently and it's so shocking, and it kind of raises things. It raises questions, not just among like transportation officials or people like that, but you know, the people want to know, am I able to fly safely? You know, a lot of people are like worried now going up in the air because now they just got rid of the mask mandate, basically. And I'm not really sure what's going to happen with that because I guess the Biden administration here is going to try to reimpose it. But, you know, a lot of people are just afraid to go up in the air because they're afraid of getting COVID. But to add this, I mean, actually, I have to be honest with you. You might even be able to get 8 people in New Jersey to react to this China crash, because to hear about this happening ever it's again, when I, like back in the 70s and 1980s, it was so much more common. It's horrible that, but happen now, even anywhere, is like, wow, I would probably react to that, my God, what's going on here? How did it happen? You know, so I mean, so we're already dealing with the crisis in the skies of people like fearing about getting sick, but also be worried about like maybe a plane actually like falling out of the sky. It's horrible. Something like that happened around 9/11. It was actually a plane that crashed like probably a couple weeks after 9/11, I think it was. It crashed in the Rockaways in New York City. It was horrible. And again, that raised the whole question of, again, terrorism. So that's another thing that's obviously been on people's minds for a very long time. Is that an issue? I don't know. Obviously, this story probably would include some background, but not too much. You want to get people familiar with what happened, but you have to kind of make that as like a secondary information. It's more about the people react. So I don't know. I'm just going to John Brown. You get maybe, or actually, I'm sorry. You're going to transition. Say some people say they're worried about the safety of air travel. So again, it's all about the reaction and it's going through people's minds right now. So you break this into transitions. John Brown said he hasn't heard of a tragedy like this in a while. He's wondering if it's safe to fly anymore. Then maybe like into his own personal experience, Brown uses air travel for his job. Now he's thinking, I don't know, about using a car service or something, or a bus. See, anecdotal information. See, and then what you do is just kind of pile these together. This is just like every other story we've been doing, right? Just that it's longer. And we go one person at a time, and then maybe a quote, And then we use another transition. Maybe we use the one I just used, okay? Others say, they already have to about the safety, their health safety. This would be in America, I guess. Now that the mask mandate has been eliminated, at least for the time being, this just compounds the problem, they say. See, another transition, right? And then you basically have Fred Jones said he's I'm gonna say something, he's just going to avoid planes altogether. Of course, this could also be a mixed reaction story. Others say that while the incident was horrible, this, plane travel is still the safest kind of transportation. And Peters said, she feels completely safe while in a plane, and then maybe like she'll put on a movie, relieve her jitters. That's what helps me at least. I still feel that way, like in a plane. Okay. So you can see again, we're going in the whole same pattern, right? We've got lead, transition, okay, anecdote, and quote, and then transition, anecdote, oops, okay, voila, right there. Okay, so it basically follows the same pattern we followed before. Okay. Now, again, if you wanted to do something like maybe an anecdotal lead, I mean, I'm going to go back into the assignment, make sure that like, I think I had a line in there basically saying that like, no, just straight leads. I'm going to change that. Okay. But anecdotal lead would be fine if you want to do something like that. You want to just take like an anecdote, you take it, from here, you would take it maybe from something you would normally put in the middle of the story, maybe put it at the top, and then basically, then you would have something like, this would become a nut graph. Jones is among many still shocked at the plane crash, and it's made them rethink. Of course, there's about a couple of opinions here, but whatever. The whole transportation or whatever. Or using the whole net. Okay. So this would be like so either Fred Jones said he's going to go, he's just going to avoid planes altogether after and then you want to put a little context here, after the China plane. Actually, I accidentally moved up an anecdote here. I'm sorry, a transition. The other, he was already, maybe quite a little more. He was already worried going up in a plane, getting all the descriptions, sweating as he holds the handles, the armrest as the plane takes off. Okay, so then you got these teases up here, and then you go into a nut graph. Okay. Okay. All right, that's that story. So again, we're kind of following the same pattern we've done before. Just again, it's just long. If you want more information, you interview more people. That's it. Or maybe you just get deeper information from people. You have them tell more of their story. Okay.
Okay. So I'm back. I apologize. Every time I show that video, I always forget that it's a little bit dated. I'm talking about COVID restrictions and things like that. But there was a moment in time where I really felt like I probably did my best job in explaining how the major assignment should be approached. So I used and reused that. But so some of that material obviously might be dated. I even mentioned like there's different presidential administration stuff like that. But this really tried to like capture yourself in that moment of time where we're trying to deal with a story about a reaction to a plane crash in China and how to handle it. Okay. I also did a thing where I referred to. Let me share the screen again. I referred to um, something that's actually I have in the feature assignment, and I linked to a story. I didn't like make a big deal about this, but this is a story that actually is about came from a magazine and how feature stories are actually kind of that we're doing is kind of almost like smaller versions of magazine stories that have more of that depth that I talk about. And I was referring to the story called Frank Sinatra Has a Cold. And as you see, the magazine style is different. I mean, it is actually supposed to more resemble a book, but again, the reading and the writing and everything is supposed to be more engaging. And what I talk about here is this whole story about how it's almost ironic and everything, but it's very much like the anecdotal leads we talked about, where it builds up suspense. We don't know what's going to happen next. He talks about Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra, the singer, actor, Academy Award winner, Grammy winner, everything. He was a legend in entertainment for a very long time. Passed away 30 years ago. He, but he had like his own kind of like, I guess you could say, cult of personality, where he had like people that hung around with him and the whole thing. And it also talked about how much of an industry he was, and basically say you have here like this build up, but it's all in one paragraph. Frank Sinatra, holding a glass of bourbon in one hand and a cigarette in the other, stood in the dark corner between two attractive but fading. This is written 60 years ago. Okay, blondes who sat waiting for him to say something, but he said nothing. And what it does is it goes on and on and talks about how miserable he was leading up to his 50th birthday. He was working on a film he disliked. He's angry about a CBS documentary on his life. He had long been, there were mob ties apparently that were long made light of. The comedian Donald Rickles used to actually make fun of him for it. But all that stuff didn't really matter. What was really ironic was this part right here was that Frank Sinatra had a cold. And that's the title of the story. So this becomes the nut graph right here that basically reflects everything that's being said. Okay. Everything this story should be about. It's just that what it does is it brings you into the suspension. What's he gonna do? Is he gonna snap? Is he gonna bring out his mob figures that are gonna like help take care of things, shake people up? No, it's Frank Sinatra has a cold, which is Picasso without paint, Ferrari without fuel, only worse. For the common cold robs Sinatra of the uninsurable jewel, his voice, cutting into the core of his confidence, and it affects not only his own psyche, but also seems to cause a kind of psychosomatic nasal drip. There's a pun there. Within dozens of people who work for him, drink with him, love him. Sinatra with a cold can, it shows how significant it is. Send vibrations to the entertainment industry and beyond as surely as the President of the United States suddenly sick and shaken national economy. Okay, there's a lot of people who work for him, the whole thing. So it's, when he goes down with a cold, it's a problem. So that's what I was referring to in that video. And that was written by New Jersey resident Gay Talese, who's now in his 90s. Anyway, that's it. We used to meet with him in when I worked for Atlantic City Press, and he would actually hold court with us in an Italian restaurant in Atlantic City. Anyway, so that's a lot about the major assignment. I'll talk more about that in my Monday video, but thanks very much, everybody. Let me know if you have any questions. And like I said in the video, it is time to maybe like start thinking about sending me at least maybe a top or rough draft of a top or something like that to the story. Not necessarily the whole thing, okay, but pretty soon, okay? All right. And don't forget that's due July 3rd, the same day as the feature rewrite. Okay. Thanks very much.